You've asked it more than once, maybe in prayer, maybe in pain. God, why are you silent? You believed. You waited. You knocked, and nothing came. No voice, no sign, just silence. And that silence started to feel like distance, like maybe he's far, or worse, uninterested. You replay your words, wondering if you prayed wrong. You question your heart, wondering if you're not worthy. But what if the silence isn't absence? What if it's not rejection? What if silence is a space, not a sentence? Maybe God stays quiet because he's closer than you think, because he wants you to lean in, not just for answers, but for him. Maybe he's not ignoring you. Maybe he's inviting you into a stillness that teaches you to trust, into a depth where his voice isn't loud, but real. Sometimes we think silence means distance, but God's silence doesn't always mean he's far. Sometimes it means he's doing something deeper. When you talk to someone face to face, they don't have to shout. The closer they are, the softer they speak. Maybe God isn't loud because he's near, and maybe his silence is how he slows you down, to still your racing thoughts, to empty your striving, to get you to stop treating him like a vending machine and start seeking him like a friend. We want instructions. He wants intimacy. And intimacy doesn't always talk. Sometimes it just stays. It sits with you in the uncertainty. It doesn't rush to explain. It chooses presence over performance. Maybe God's silence isn't him withholding love. Maybe it's him offering himself, not in words, in nearness, in peace, in presence that never leaves. We often expect God to speak like the world does, loud, fast, constant, but he isn't in a hurry, and his silence isn't careless, it's intentional. When God is silent, he's often strengthening your trust, not in the outcome, in him, because trust that only exists when he speaks isn't trust. It's transaction, but trust that keeps walking when there's no voice, no sign, no feeling. That's real. That's the kind of faith that shakes hell, the kind that says, even if I don't hear, I'll still follow. God isn't quiet because you've done something wrong. Sometimes he's quiet because he's teaching you to stand on his promises, on his presence, not on your emotions, not on your timing. Silence doesn't mean he's punishing you. It means he's preparing you. And that preparation happens in the still places, where his whisper becomes more than a sound. It becomes your anchor. What if God's silence isn't a test you're failing, but a space he's creating? A space where you stop depending on signs and start depending on him, where you stop chasing the feeling and start trusting the foundation. Feelings shift, faith stays, and God wants to anchor you in something unshakable. But sometimes that means letting go of the noise, letting go of the need to feel something all the time, because faith isn't about feeling his presence. It's about believing he's still there, even when you don't. That kind of belief doesn't form in the middle of noise. It forms in the quiet, in the places where you question, wrestle, wait. Silence isn't always empty. Sometimes it's full of growth, full of stretching, full of grace. You're not being ignored. You're being invited, deeper, slower, closer than before. Sometimes silence isn't something to fix. It's something to feel. We rush to fill the quiet, to force a moment, to make something happen. But God's not in the forcing. He's in the waiting. And that waiting shapes you. It slows you. It strips you of control and teaches you surrender. You realize you don't need more answers. You need more awareness, not of what he's doing, but of who he is. God's silence often brings us face to face with ourselves, our fears, our idols, the noise we use to avoid our own emptiness. But it also brings us face to face with grace, with a God who stays even when he doesn't speak, who loves even when we don't feel it, who works even when we don't see it. Silence doesn't mean nothing's happening. It means something deeper is, right under the surface, right inside your soul. You want a word, a sign, something clear, but maybe God isn't giving you a word because He's making you one. He's shaping you in the quiet, forming strength in your silence. You're not being punished, you're being prepared. Sometimes the greatest clarity comes not from hearing God, but from trusting Him when you don't. That kind of trust can't be taught in a sermon. It's formed in the silence, in the spaces where your hands are empty, but your heart stays open, where you stop performing faith and start embodying it. God isn't holding back to confuse you. He's holding space to deepen you, to make your roots go further than your reach, because He knows what's coming, and He's making sure you're anchored, not in answers, but in Him. You asked for clarity. He's giving you depth, not louder, truer, stronger. You thought God's silence meant distance, but maybe it's where He's actually been the closest. Because silence isn't the absence of love, it's often the context for it. Think of a parent sitting beside a hurting child, not saying a word, just staying close. That presence, though quiet, speaks louder than words. Maybe that's what God's doing now. Not explaining, not fixing, just staying, steady, unshaken. You keep asking, "Where are you?" And He whispers, "Right here." Not through signs, not through noise, but through peace that makes no sense. Through breath in your lungs, through the quiet strength keeping you from falling apart. God doesn't always answer your questions. Sometimes He answers your soul, not with explanation, with presence. The silence isn't the end of the conversation. Sometimes it's the moment He sits beside you and says nothing, because that's exactly what you need. Maybe you've misunderstood the silence, thought it meant you were forgotten, left out, disqualified. But silence might be the place where God trusts you most, because you're still here, still seeking, still listening, even when it's quiet. That says more than you know. Heaven isn't waiting for a perfect prayer. It's moved by a faithful heart. And if all you can say is, "God, I miss you," that's enough. He hears that. He honors that. Because the silence you're in now is not the end. It's the hallway between who you were and who you're becoming. A sacred space where trust gets real and love goes deeper than words. So sit in the silence, not as punishment, but as invitation. When was the last time you trusted God without needing a sound? And what if His silence has been speaking all along?